I froze in the shadowy hallway of the apartment complex, my hand hovering just inches from the doorknob. Inside, a voice, dripping with a kind of malice that made my skin crawl, cut through the heavy silence. That old hag has no idea what's coming for her tonight. My breath hitched in my throat. I knew that voice. It was my daughter-in-law, and she was talking about me. I never imagined a simple phone call could flip my world upside down like a pancake on a Sunday morning. That Friday, the phone rang just as I was pouring my morning coffee. I recognized the voice instantly, even though I hadn't heard it in nearly a year. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. Not since that awful argument where my son David screamed at me to stop interfering in his life. Since then, silence had become the third roommate in my lonely house. So when I heard her voice, sweet and thick like syrup, saying, "Mom Susan, I want to invite you to dinner. It's time to bury the hatchet," I felt something strange in my chest. It was a cocktail of surprise, relief, and a heavy dose of suspicion. I took a deep breath before answering. "A dinner?" "Yes," she insisted. "David and I think it's time to leave the past behind. I'm making your favorite dish." That detail threw me off balance. I didn't remember ever telling her what my favorite meal was. "It'll be good to see you, honey," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. When she hung up, I stared at the phone with my heart squeezed tight in my chest. "But before we go on, I have a special invitation for you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It helps me know you're supporting me and enjoying these stories. And drop a comment down below telling me what city you're watching from. Now let's keep going." That night, I sat by the window watching the rain streak down the glass. The reflection showed me a tired woman, wearing more scars than years. I thought back to the last time I was at David's condo. The tension, the side eyes, the chill in the air, even though it was the middle of July. Vanessa barely spoke to me that afternoon. She just watched me with a polite smile and eyes like cold stones. My son, on the other hand, avoided talking altogether, walking on eggshells as if fearing any sentence might set off a bomb. I knew Vanessa had changed David. She had turned him distant, controlled, a stranger in his own skin. That's why the invitation smelled like a trap, or a miracle. And like any mother worth her salt, I chose to believe in the miracle. I spent the day cleaning the house, preparing a small gift, a photo album of David when he was a little boy. Every picture was an old wound, but also a reminder that a mother's love doesn't fade, no matter how hard people try to drown it. Maybe this dinner is the start of something new, I thought. A part of me still believed in second chances. I arrived early. The clock in the hallway read 7:30 p.m. when I got off the elevator at their floor. I rang the bell, but no one answered. The door was slightly ajar. I figured maybe they hadn't heard me. I pushed it open gently and stepped inside. The smell of expensive perfume and burning wax hung heavy in the air. From the kitchen, I could hear footsteps and Vanessa's voice on the phone. Yes, everything is ready. That old hag has no idea what's coming for her tonight." My body turned to ice. I didn't know whether to drop my purse or turn around and bolt. My breathing sounded like a freight train in my ears. I clutched the photo album against my chest and took a step back, trying to be as quiet as a ghost. Vanessa kept talking. "I'll text you as soon as she gets here. Don't worry, I have it all under control." The world seemed to stop spinning. My first reaction was to think I'd heard wrong. Isn't that what we always do? We try to edit reality to protect our hearts, but her voice left no room for doubt. "That old hag has no idea what's coming for her tonight." Who else could she be talking about? I backed out slowly, leaving the door exactly as I found it. I rushed down the stairs, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the rain had picked up. I ran without direction, washing my face with tears and rainwater at the same time. I walked for hours, or at least it felt that way. I had nowhere to go. My sisters lived 2 states over, and my friends had drifted away since David got married. I took shelter under the awning of a closed shop, trying to organize the chaos in my mind. What if I was wrong? What if she wasn't talking about me? But that phrase, replaying over and over, sounded like a judge's sentence. I thought about calling David. My heart wanted to dial his number, but my gut stopped me. If he was in on it, what would I say? "Hey, I heard your wife plotting against me." He'd laugh. He'd call me paranoid. He'd done it before. The night grew colder, seeping into my bones. In the middle of my desperation, I remembered that Vanessa worked for an insurance company, and about a month ago, she had asked, out of the blue, if I still kept my late husband's last will and testament safe. "Just as a precaution," she had said. Fear turned into a solid, heavy certainty in my stomach. I went back to my house with soaked shoes and a ruined soul. I turned on the dining room light, took off my coat, and sat in front of the photo album. The pictures stared back at me like silent witnesses. David as a child, laughing, hugging me. At what point did he become someone who could allow this? Or worse, at what point did he stop seeing who his mother was? I poured myself some tea to calm down, but the cup rattled in my hands. I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, that sentence. That old hag has no idea what's coming for her tonight. I looked at the clock. It was 10:15 p.m. The dinner should have started without me. Had they noticed my absence? Were they celebrating it? That question cut through me like a jagged blade. Rage began to push out the fear. I wiped my tears, put my coat back on, and grabbed my purse. "I'm not going to hide," I said out loud, staring at myself in the hallway mirror. "If they want to play games with me, they'll do it face to face." I left the house and walked back toward their condo, my heartbeat thumping in my ears. I went up the stairs cautiously. The door was still cracked open. The dining room lights were on. I could hear music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Everything seemed normal. I gripped the doorknob with cold fingers, turned it slowly, and pushed the door open. I stepped in without making a sound. The aroma of pot roast and red wine filled the air. I took 2 steps. Then I looked toward the dining table, and what I saw froze the blood in my veins. The hallway was empty, but I could swear a shadow moved behind the kitchen door. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I took a step back, unable to take my eyes off that blurry silhouette. The air smelled of wine and floral perfume, but also something else. Something metallic, sterile, like a hospital waiting room right before bad news. I moved closer slowly. I heard laughter in the background, my son's voice, then Vanessa's, soft, sugary, fake, and the sound of glasses toasting. Then I saw the carving knife on the dining table. It gleamed under the yellow chandelier light, freshly washed, and next to it, a white envelope with my name written on it. For Mom Susan. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I took one more step and heard someone approaching. I didn't have time to think. I bolted for the hallway, leaving the envelope behind. I threw open the door and flew down the stairs, barely touching the steps. The freezing street air slapped me in the face. I ran to the corner, hands shaking, my soul about to spill over. I didn't know where to go. I just knew I couldn't go back. Not yet. I walked aimlessly for several minutes until my legs forced me to stop. I took refuge in an empty bus stop. The rain was coming down hard now, and the sky had turned the same dull gray I felt in my chest. I couldn't stop replaying what I had heard and what I had just seen. Was it real? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? Vanessa had always been calculating, yes, but she also knew how to fake affection when it suited her. After my husband died, she was the first to offer to help me with the bills. For years, she handled the inheritance paperwork. And I, naive as a child, let her. I trusted my son, and by extension, I trusted her. I thought that was the right way to keep a family united. What a cruel joke. That trust was now the rope tightening around my neck. Rainwater soaked through my shoes. My fingers were trembling. I pulled out my phone to call someone, but I didn't know who. The police? And say what? I think my daughter-in-law is planning to hurt me? It would sound ridiculous. Besides, what if I was wrong? My mind started pulling up old memories. I remembered the first time I met Vanessa, the day David introduced us. She wore a blue dress, hair down, flashing that charming smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. But her eyes never smiled. From that instant, I felt something, a silent discomfort. Not because she was bad, but because she was too perfect, too attentive, too sweet, too everything. People like that are always hiding something. Then came the subtleties, the backhanded compliments, the insinuations. "Oh, Susan, it's a shame you don't understand investments. David and I know how to move money." Or that day she referred to me as an emotional burden for poor David. She always smiled when she said it, as if the poison didn't count if it was served on a silver platter. And now, it all made sense. That dinner wasn't a reconciliation. It was an ambush, a stage set for something I still couldn't quite understand. I stayed at the bus stop a while longer, watching the cars pass. The icy wind made my eyes water. An older gentleman approached with an umbrella and offered me shelter under the roof. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "Yes. Just got a little dizzy," I lied. "I shouldn't be out alone at this hour. I'm going home now, thank you." I waited for him to leave and cross the street. My instincts screamed at me not to go back, but curiosity, that curse we women who love too much possess, pushed me back. I had to know what was in that envelope with my name on it. When I got to the building, the hallway lights were off. Everything was silent. I approached the apartment door with caution. The music had stopped. Only the dripping of a faucet could be heard. I pushed the door just enough to peek inside. The envelope was no longer on the table, nor was the knife, nor the wine. Just 2 empty glasses and a vase of wilted flowers. I called out softly, "Vanessa? David?" No one answered. I took another step and felt something crunch under my feet. It was a shard of glass. I crouched down. It was part of a broken wine glass. The floor was wet. I didn't know if it was wine or something worse. I turned around and saw something that froze my soul. David and Vanessa's wedding portrait, snapped in two, thrown on the floor. My son's face had been slashed out with a razor blade, and on the frame, in red marker, someone had written, "Debts get paid, sooner or later." Panic paralyzed me. I ran. I flew down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the corner. My heart was beating like a trapped bird trying to escape my chest. I leaned against a lamppost, trying to catch my breath. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you value your life, don't go back there. The wheels are in motion." I felt my legs give out. I looked around, searching for faces in the shadows. But the street was deserted. Just the sound of the rain, persistent, endless. I didn't reply. I turned off my phone and started walking in the opposite direction, without a destination, without sense, just with one certainty nailed into my chest. Someone wanted me gone. I didn't go home that night. I slept in a cheap motel downtown, a place with flickering neon signs. The mattress was hard as a rock. The air smelled of stale cigarettes and mildew, but at least I could close my eyes without fearing someone would burst through the door. I stared at the ceiling for hours, going over every detail. Vanessa's voice, the knife, the envelope, the message. Nothing fit together yet, but I sensed this wasn't just family drama. It was something bigger, something prepared over time, a perfect trap where I wasn't supposed to just die, but to be framed. Sleep finally overtook me at dawn, and before I drifted off, I whispered to myself, if they think I'm going to let them destroy me, they don't know who they're dealing with. The next morning, I woke up with my heart still racing. The clock read 9 a.m., and the sound of traffic outside pulled me back to reality. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. The musty smell of that rented room reminded me of the night before. Vanessa's voice, the knife, the envelope, the anonymous text. It was all still there, etched in my mind like a nightmare that wouldn't dissolve with the sunlight. I took a sip of the cold tea I'd left on the nightstand, and as I did, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay hidden. If I wanted to understand what they were plotting against me, I had to go back. But this time, not as the naive mother hoping for affection, but as a woman who had seen the face of danger. I showered, dressed in simple clothes, dark slacks, a beige blouse, and tucked something into my purse that had been my constant companion since I became a widow. A rosary. Not so much for faith, but for habit. The touch of the cold beads between my fingers gave me a strange sense of control, a connection to something beyond the fear. I left the motel and walked to the bus stop. Every step was an internal dialogue between terror and determination. Go, but don't talk much. Smile, but watch. Listen, Susan. Listen. When I arrived at the building, the doorman, a young guy I barely knew, looked at me oddly. Back again, Mrs. Bennett? Yes, I said naturally. My daughter-in-law invited me to dinner last night, but I had to leave early. We agreed to meet today. The boy nodded, suspecting nothing. I climbed the stairs with my heart beating in my throat. When I reached the door, I took a deep breath and rang the bell. Vanessa opened it almost immediately. Her face showed surprise and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mom, Susan, what a joy to see you. I thought you had changed your mind last night. I had a dizzy spell, I lied. I didn't want to worry you both. Oh, don't worry, we understand. Come in, please. The condo was spotless, as always. Smell of lavender, candles lit, soft jazz playing. Everything perfectly calculated to look normal. Too normal. David came out of the hallway with open arms. Mom, you don't know how happy I am to see you. His hug was warm but brief, almost mechanical. He looked me in the eyes, and for an instant, I thought I saw guilt or fear. I couldn't tell the difference. We sat at the table. The tablecloth was new, the silverware sparkled, and the red wine was already poured into 3 glasses. I watched every detail, every movement. Vanessa talked nonstop, telling me trivial stories about work, about how much Lily, my granddaughter, was growing, about vacation plans, all so perfectly casual, it was suspicious. I picked up the glass with my fingers, but I didn't drink. The wine had a strong, distinct aroma. While they laughed, I faked a clumsy movement and let a drop fall onto the tablecloth. The liquid left a dark stain. Vanessa rushed to clean it with a nervous gesture. Don't worry, she said. I'm clumsy sometimes too. Clumsy. The word echoed in my head. She wasn't clumsy. Nothing about her was clumsy. Halfway through dinner, Lily appeared in her pajamas. Grandma, she said with a sleepy voice, why were Mommy and Daddy fighting so loud last night? Vanessa looked at her with a frozen smile. Go to your room, sweetie. But the little girl kept talking. I heard when Daddy said he didn't want anything bad to happen to you, Grandma, and Mommy told him, "It's too late. It's already done." The silence became a fourth person at the table. My heart started beating so fast I was afraid they could see it. Vanessa tried to cover it up. "Kids invent things, you know," she said with forced laughter. I nodded, faking calm, while inside I felt my world crumbling. Lily came over and hugged me from behind. "Don't go, Grandma," she whispered in my ear. "I don't want anything to happen to you." My body shuddered. I hugged her gently, not letting Vanessa see my tears. After dinner, Vanessa insisted I stay a while longer. "We can have some coffee, or a liqueur, if you prefer." "Thanks, honey, but I have to get up early tomorrow." "Oh, come on, just for a moment." I noticed the insistence, and that confirmed everything. She didn't want me to leave. Not yet. I took a handkerchief from my purse, pretended to wipe my lips, and while I did, my fingers brushed the tiny camera I had hidden in the seams of my handbag. I had bought the gadget a year ago, on the recommendation of a neighbor who lived alone. I never imagined I'd use it like this. But that night, I did. Vanessa brought the coffee. David got up to answer a call. While he was out of the room, she approached with the tray. Her voice changed. It didn't sound sweet anymore, but low, sharp. "So you came back, huh?" she whispered, smiling without looking at me. "You don't know how happy that makes me." I stayed perfectly still. She placed the cup in front of me with a slow gesture. "I made this coffee especially for you. It is unforgettable." Her eyes shined with something dark. For a second, I thought she was going to do it right there, in front of me, without fear, without hiding. But she just took a seat, crossing her legs with elegance. I rested my hands on the table, not touching the cup. "Why so much effort to make peace with me, Vanessa?" I asked softly. "Because you are my husband's mother, and that makes you important." She answered with a poisoned smile. "And because debts must be settled sooner or later." That phrase, the same one I had read written in red marker on the broken portrait. My blood ran cold. David came back at that moment, and she changed her tone as if nothing happened. "Is everything ready, my love?" she asked, faking sweetness. He nodded, but didn't answer. I looked at him, and something in his expression confirmed what I already feared. He knew too. Dinner ended with tense smiles. They offered to drive me home, but I declined. I preferred to walk. I needed air, distance, and time to think. That night, as I walked back to my small apartment, I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was something much bigger, a carefully crafted plan to erase my existence and keep everything that belonged to me. And as I walked under the yellow streetlights, an idea pushed its way into my mind, as clear as the pain I was feeling. If they had a plan, I could have one too. That night I slept little, but I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I had gone from being the scared woman running in the rain to something different, an observer. I was no longer just a victim. Now I had a purpose: uncover the truth. And I would do it without screaming, without confrontations, with patience. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's intelligence. I made myself a bitter coffee and opened the notebook where for years I had written recipes, dates, and phone numbers. On those aged paper pages, my counterattack began. I wrote down what I remembered: the phrase I heard on the phone, the scene with the envelope, the knife, Lily's words, the wine stain, Vanessa's smile, the glimmer of guilt in David's eyes. Everything, every detail, could be a piece of the puzzle. Then I wrote a question at the bottom of the page. What exactly do they want from me? I decided to start with the only tangible thing, the inheritance from my late husband, Arthur. I remembered that shortly before dying, he told me he had left everything arranged so I wouldn't have financial problems. He trusted David to handle some documents, and it was Vanessa who at the time offered to organize the papers. I was never interested in reading them. The grief of losing Arthur had clouded my mind, but now I knew I had to. I went to the closet where I kept a metal lockbox. There were the original documents, the will, the property deeds, the bank account copies, or at least that's what I thought. Because when I opened the box, I noticed something that chilled me. The signatures weren't mine. They had forged my signature. The stroke was perfect, but not the pulse. My letters were soft, almost rounded. These, however, had force and haste. Whoever did it knew my handwriting well, but not my soul. I checked the papers one by one. Among them, I found a recent contract with David's name as legal representative. The date matched the month I stopped receiving the monthly deposit from the joint account. It was clear. They were stripping me little by little, like someone emptying a house without breaking anything, so as not to arouse suspicion. I called my old friend Linda, a retired lawyer, the only person I still trusted. We had known each other since we were young girls. She had been by my side when Arthur got sick. I asked her to come over without telling her too much. When she arrived, she noticed my agitation immediately. "What's wrong, Susan? You're pale." I showed her the documents. She reviewed them with the patience of someone who has seen too many frauds disguised as kindness. "This is serious," she said finally. "There's forgery and breach of trust here. Can I report them?" "Yes, but you need solid proof, something more than suspicions or shady signatures." "Then I'll find it. Don't be rash. They don't know that you know. Keep calm and observe." Her advice was simple but valuable. Fake normality while recording every word, every gesture. That same afternoon, I went to the bank. I asked to speak with the manager. I showed him the documents and explained with a trembling voice that I suspected an error. The man, polite but uncomfortable, asked me to wait in a small room. After a few minutes, he returned with a folder and a nervous smile. "Mrs. Bennett, it says here you signed the transfer authorization last month. Could you show me your signature?" I showed him. It was identical to mine. Too identical, as if it had been traced. In that instant, a phrase of Vanessa's echoed in my head. "Debts must be settled, sooner or later." I knew then that they didn't just want my house or my money. They wanted to erase my name, my legal existence, my identity, and turn my life into their alibi. I went back home with a lump in my throat. I turned on the dining room lamp and took out my purse. There was the small camera I had used the night before. I reviewed the recording on my laptop. The video showed the dinner, Vanessa's gestures, the sentences loaded with insinuation, and most importantly, Lily's voice saying her parents were arguing because it was too late, everything was done. That phrase was pure gold, proof that something was being plotted. I saved the recording on a USB drive and hid it inside an old porcelain figurine Arthur had given me for our anniversary. No one would think to look there. That night, David called me. "Mom, Vanessa feels bad about yesterday. She thinks you misunderstood things." "Don't worry, son," I said calmly. "It was a wonderful dinner." "Really?" "Yes, I'm very grateful." "I'm glad to hear that," he replied, relieved. "Tomorrow we'll come by to see you. We want to show you something important." When he hung up, I felt the walls closing in around me. "Show you something important." I knew those words didn't foreshadow anything good. If they planned to continue their theater, I had to get ahead of them. I went to the desk drawer and took out an old voice recorder, one my husband used when he worked as an accountant. I tested it. It worked. I recorded a message in case something happened to me. I am Susan Bennett. If anyone hears this, it means I discovered something dangerous. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, and my son, David, are forging documents and planning something graver. I have proof stored in a safe place. I left it inside the closet, in a hidden pocket of my winter coat. That early morning, I didn't sleep. I walked through the house in silence, looking at the family photos on the wall. In one of them, David was barely 7 years old, with a huge smile and eyes full of tenderness. I remembered how he hugged me when he had nightmares, how he promised to take care of me when he grew up. At what moment did I stop being his refuge and become his target? The question burned my soul, but I couldn't stop the course of events anymore. The wheel had started turning, and if they thought they would break me, they would discover that women like me don't break. We transform. Before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook, "They have their plan, I also have mine, and tomorrow it begins." The sunrise of the next day brought a deceptive calm. The first rays of sun painted my living room with a warm glow, but inside me, there was no serenity. There was only precision. Every thought was a piece that had to fit into place. I knew they would come that day. I knew they would smile, fake love, and show me something important. But this time I would be ready. I prepared the dining table with almost ritualistic meticulousness. 2 glasses of wine, a pitcher of water, a plate of cookies that smelled like childhood. No extravagances. I wanted it to look like a casual encounter, a mother longing for peace. But behind that stage were invisible traps. In the corner, on a shelf, I hid the tiny camera pointing toward the table. The voice recorder was activated inside a tea box. The phone, charged, and with the automatic recording option on. I couldn't afford a mistake. Before continuing, I breathed deep and lit a candle. I spoke to the portrait of my late husband. "Arthur, if you can hear me, give me strength. Not for revenge, but to end this nightmare." Then I looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't the same woman who ran out into the rain days ago. I was another, firmer, more lucid, more dangerous. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Tell me here in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in my place. Don't click away, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. My heart responded with a dry thud. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door. There stood David and Vanessa. They looked like a couple from a magazine cover, so composed, so falsely perfect. She brought a box of chocolates. He brought a smile that didn't belong to him. "Mom," David said, kissing my cheek. "So good to see you." "The pleasure is mine, son," I replied. Vanessa handed me the box. "Sweets to sweeten the bad memories," she said with her honeyed tone. I nodded and invited them in. We sat down. The atmosphere was strange, dense, as if every word weighed tons. Vanessa started talking. "We wanted to show you something." She opened her purse and took out some documents. "These are the house papers. We decided to help you update the deed." Update the deed. The phrase tasted like poison. I knew it meant taking away the little that remained in my name, but I feigned interest. "What a thoughtful detail, honey. I'm so bad with paperwork." "We know," David said kindly. "That's why we handled it. Just need your signature." I smiled. "Of course. But before I sign, I want to make a toast to us." Vanessa looked delighted. I filled the wine glasses with slow movements. "To family," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings," she added. We clinked glasses, and the sound of the crystal resonated like an echo inside my soul. I didn't drink. I just watched how Vanessa took a sip. Then, with a smile, I placed mine on the table. Well then, I asked, what am I supposed to sign? She slid the papers over. Just some minor transfers, she said. Ah, I understand. And this last document, I asked, pointing to one that had my full name. An authorization. Legal matters. Her hands shook slightly, a detail almost imperceptible, but enough to confirm it. She was lying. While they talked, I pretended to look for my glasses. I took the opportunity to check the phone that was recording audio. Everything was going according to plan. Then calmly I asked, Vanessa, honey, do you remember what you said that night on the phone, before the dinner? She froze. What night? The night you invited me. You said that old hag had no idea what was coming for her. Her face went pale. Must have been a misunderstanding, she stammered. Of course, misunderstandings are my specialty, I said, with a smile that wasn't a smile. David looked at me confused. Mom, what are you talking about? About something called respect, son. Something lost when one sells their soul for a signature. There was a long silence. The clock struck 10:20. Outside, dogs barked, and I, for the first time, wasn't afraid. You know what's funny, Vanessa? I said, resting my hands on the table. That sometimes the smartest plans collapse with a single voice. What are you insinuating? She asked, frowning. Nothing, just that an innocent child usually speaks more than she should. Her expression changed immediately. She knew I was talking about Lily. Her lips tightened, and in her eyes shone something close to panic. What did she hear? She asked. More than enough. David stood up. Mom, you're exaggerating. Vanessa didn't mean anything bad. I know, I replied, but recordings don't lie. The color drained from their faces. I enjoyed a few seconds of that uncomfortable silence before continuing. Don't be alarmed. I just want you to know that everything said here is being recorded. Vanessa stood up abruptly. This is insanity. Yes, it is, I said. Insanity that began when you tried to make me disappear. David tried to calm her, but she pushed him away. I told you not to trust her, she whispered with rage. Enough, he shouted. I remained silent, observing. Sometimes the best word is the one not said. The tension grew until it became unbearable. Vanessa took the documents and ripped them up. You want proof, old woman? You have nothing. On the contrary, dear, I said, standing up. I have everything. I went to the shelf and lifted the tea box. Here is the truth, I said, pointing to the recorder. Your words, your threats, everything. She stepped back, stunned. David looked at me with red eyes. Why did you do this, Mom? He asked with a trembling voice. Because you forced me to. We just wanted to protect what's ours. Yours? I laughed bitterly. Everything yours came from me, from my work, from my love, from my sacrifice. The clock struck 10:30. Outside, the sound of a car engine was heard. Expecting someone? I asked calmly. Vanessa looked at me without answering. I went to the door and opened it. The sound of a police siren was getting closer. Vanessa went pale. What did you do? She whispered. The same thing as you. I prepared my dinner. Only mine isn't served with poison, but with justice. And when the officers entered, with lights reflecting on the walls, I knew my trap had worked. The blue lights of the patrol cars illuminated the walls of my living room, tinting the family portraits with a cold, soulless glow. The squawk of the police radio filled the silences no one dared to break. I remained standing, leaning on the back of a chair, hands clasped, while they, my son and his wife, were surrounded by 2 officers. Vanessa tried to compose herself. Her voice at first was sweet, sugary, almost convincing. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law is sick. Lately, she confuses things, invents stories. Look, we have documents to prove she gave us everything voluntarily." The officer watched her without emotion. I kept silent. I had learned that silence, at the right moment, can be more powerful than any word. "Mrs. Bennett," the agent said finally, "do you have proof of what you claim?" "Yes," I replied, pointing to the shelf. "In that box are recordings, copies of documents, and a forged will." The policeman nodded and asked his partner to check them. The rustle of papers, the click of the recorder, and the sound of the reproduced voices filled the air with unbearable tension. In the recording, Vanessa's voice was clearly heard. "That old hag has no idea what's coming for her tonight." And then the voice of Lily, my granddaughter, saying her parents were arguing because it was too late. The agent looked up. "Do you have anything to say, ma'am?" he asked, addressing Vanessa. She took a deep breath and for the first time lost control. Her voice cracked. Her mask broke. "This was all David's idea," she screamed, pointing at him with a trembling finger. "I just helped him. He forced me." David turned toward her with an expression of horror. "What are you saying? You said it was for the best, that we had to do it before she changed the will." The world seemed to stop. My knees shook. "The will?" I asked with a voice barely audible. David went quiet. Vanessa continued without hesitation. "Yes, your son was afraid you'd leave him with nothing. He thought you were going to donate the house. I just supported him." I don't know how I stayed standing. I felt my heart beating in my ears. I looked at David, searching his face for a denial, a sign of regret, but I only saw shame. He couldn't hold my gaze. "Is it true?" I asked him. Silence. "Tell me, David." He swallowed hard. "It wasn't like that, Mom." "Then how was it?" I insisted. "We had debts. Vanessa lost her job, and I didn't know how to tell you we needed help." The words floated like knives in the air. "And the solution was to rob me?" I said, my voice cracking. "We didn't want to hurt you," he replied. "Just, we thought you could live with less." "With less?" I laughed, a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. "With less love, with less respect, with less dignity, right?" He lowered his head. Vanessa was crying, but not out of guilt. She was crying out of fear, the fear of someone watching their own plan collapse. The agents asked a few more questions. Then, while they waited for the supervisor to arrive, they left them sitting on the sofa, separated. I stayed by the window, watching the night. Outside, car lights passed like ghosts, and inside me, something was slowly extinguishing. I remembered when David was a boy, how he hid behind me when he was afraid of thunder, how he asked me to tell him stories before sleeping, and how he swore to me, at just 8 years old, that he would always protect me. What a cruel irony. "Mom," he whispered from the sofa. "Forgive me." I turned toward him. "I don't know if I can, son." "I didn't want to go this far." "But you did," I replied coldly, "and you dragged me with you." The officer spoke again. "Mrs. Bennett, everything presented will be verified, but the recordings and documents are enough to start a formal investigation." I nodded. Vanessa tried to get up, but the agent stopped her. "Please, sit down. You cannot leave yet." She looked at him with eyes full of hate. "This won't stay like this," she murmured. "You're right," I answered her. "It won't stay like this, because this time I won't be the one telling the lies." The minutes felt eternal. When they finally took them away, the house was left in a tomb-like silence. I could hear my breathing and the tick-tock of the clock. The walls seemed to watch me, silent witnesses of a tragedy that had started as a family dinner and ended with handcuffs and sirens. I walked to the table and blew out the candle. The melted wax formed a perfect circle, like a wound closing. I felt a knot in my throat and let the tears fall without resistance. I wasn't crying for them. I was crying for the woman I had been before all this, the naive one, the trusting one, the mother who believed love could conquer all. A few minutes passed before Lily came down the stairs. Her little eyes were red, scared. "What happened, Grandma? Why did they take Mommy and Daddy?" I knelt in front of her and hugged her tight. "Because sometimes, my love, adults do bad things and have to learn." "Are they coming back?" "I don't know," I said, stroking her hair. "But in the meantime, you're going to be okay. I promise you." She nodded in silence, and in that gesture, I felt a spark of hope. Because even though the pain pierced through me, not everything was lost. That night, when Lily fell asleep in my arms, I understood something I had never fully grasped. That forgiveness isn't always given out of love, but out of freedom. And that sometimes, justice doesn't come with punishment, but with the truth exposed. I turned off the light and stayed watching the darkness. I thought of Arthur, of his voice, of his silent warnings. Maybe he always knew this day would come. Maybe that's why he had left me something more than an inheritance. He had left me strength. And as the clock ticked forward, I swore in silence that my story wouldn't end there, because the truth had barely started to speak, and I would never silence it again. The sirens faded in the distance, and the night hung suspended in an impossible silence. The blue lights disappeared, leaving my house plunged into a stillness that hurt more than any scream. Everything smelled of spilled wine, torn papers, candle ash, and betrayal. I stayed seated in front of the empty table, staring at the half-eaten plates, the ownerless glasses, the traces of a shattered family. I didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The clock kept marking the passage of time, indifferent to my ruin. Only the steady tick-tock was witness that I still existed. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. A sharp, firm sound. My heart skipped a beat. For a second, I thought it was the police again, or maybe them. But no. When I opened it, I found the figure of the building's doorman. "Excuse me, Mrs. Bennet," he said nervously. "They came to leave this for you," and he handed me a sealed envelope. I took it, trembling. It had my name written by hand, in handwriting I recognized immediately. Arthur, my late husband. I sat down, unable to open it instantly. The simple fact of seeing his handwriting was like a stab in the chest. The doorman left, and I remained alone with that paper that seemed to burn in my hands. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a carefully folded letter and a small notarized document. I began to read. "If you are reading this, Susan, it is because I am no longer here. And if you got this far, it is because you discovered what I feared, that my trust in David would be put to the test. Don't judge him too harshly. The world made him weak, but do protect him from those who manipulate him. Vanessa is not who she says she is." My breath caught. I kept reading, eyes blurred. "Before meeting you, Vanessa lived a dark past. Her real name is Valerie Smith, and she has a record for fraud and identity theft. David never knew, and neither did I until shortly before I died. I tried to warn him, but it was too late. If something happens to me, find the attorney, Mr. Henderson. He knows the truth." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. The attached legal document confirmed the impossible. Arthur had modified his will after the last version Vanessa had shown me, and in that final version, he left everything in the name of Lily, my granddaughter. Not to me, nor to David. To her. The tears began to fall without permission. They weren't just from sadness. They were from relief, from justice, from love beyond death. Arthur, even after everything, had found a way to protect us. I tucked the papers inside my coat and sat in the armchair, trying to process what I had just discovered. The clock struck midnight when I heard footsteps outside. I looked out the window and saw a man in a dark suit getting out of a car. His silhouette was familiar. He knocked gently. "Mrs. Bennett?" said a deep voice. "I am Mr. Henderson, the attorney. Your husband asked me to come see you when the time came." I invited him in. His face reflected respect, but also concern. "I received the call from the police. I know what happened, and believe me, ma'am, your husband foresaw it all." He showed me a briefcase and took out a USB drive. "Here is the recording of the day Arthur came to my office. He asked me to keep it until someone tried to appropriate his assets." We connected it to the computer, and there he was, Arthur, with his firm voice, his calm gaze. "If one day Susan hears this, I want her to know that I love her, and that I trust she will know how to see beyond appearances. I have discovered that Vanessa is forging my signature on business documents. If something happens to me, look for Henderson. He has the proof. And Susan, take care of our granddaughter. She is the only innocent one." My heart broke. I cried, but this time not from pain, but from gratitude. Arthur's voice was my confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that everything I had felt, suspected, and suffered made sense. Mr. Henderson explained that he had started a legal process before Arthur's death, but it was mysteriously halted when he passed away. Now, with the recordings and the final will, everything could be resumed. "We can clear your name and protect Lily's future," he said with serenity. I nodded, drying my tears. "I will do that, not for revenge, for justice." When he left, the house fell silent again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was a new, different one, the silence of truth beginning to breathe. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and made tea. While the water boiled, I remembered every detail of that dinner, every word from Vanessa, every look from David. Everything had been a carefully constructed farce, but the truth had barged in uninvited, like the police that night. Lily woke up startled and came looking for me. "Grandma, I had a nightmare," she said. "It's over, my love," I replied, hugging her. "I dreamed we were all eating together, but the plate broke." "Sometimes plates have to break," I told her, "so we can clear the table and start over." I sat her next to me, covered her with a blanket, and whispered, "Your grandpa left you a gift." She opened her eyes surprised. "A gift?" "Yes, a future clean of lies." The little girl smiled, and in that smile I felt the circle beginning to close. That early morning I didn't sleep. I wrote a letter to my son, knowing that, even if he didn't read it soon, someday he would. "David, I loved you beyond your mistakes. I never wanted you to pay for your sins, but to understand the damage you caused. If one day you decide to look back, remember that you still have a home, not to justify yourself, but to heal. Because a mother's love, although wounded, doesn't die. It only transforms." I left it on the table next to Arthur's envelope. Life had closed its cycle with another paper, another truth, another wound, and as the dawn turned the sky a pinkish gray, I knew the last act was still to come. because justice had made its way. Yes, but peace, that peace I sought so much, was still yet to reach me. 3 months have passed since that night. 3 months since the police took my son and his wife, since my house became empty and silent. Time, that ruthless judge, has been erasing the echo of the screams, but not the memory of what I learned. Now the days pass slowly. The sunrise comes through the window and rests on the floral tablecloth, the same one I used that dinner. It no longer has wine stains, but every time I rest my hands on it, I feel the fabric holds the weight of the truths that were spilled that night. Sometimes I wonder if all this was inevitable, if destiny had to break me like this to show me who my family really was. Because there are wounds that only open when one loves too much, and betrayals that only hurt because love made them possible. Lily lives with me. The house filled up again with laughter, with drawings on the walls and off-key songs. She doesn't ask much, but her eyes know everything. She has the same compassionate look Arthur had when he told me the truth always ends up coming out, even if it hides under the tablecloth. In the afternoons, we walk together to the park. She runs, plays with the birds, and sometimes stops to look at me. "Grandma," she tells me with a sweet voice, "did you forgive Mommy and Daddy?" I always take a moment to answer. I am learning. I answer her, "Sometimes forgiveness doesn't come all at once, honey. It comes like rain, little by little." She nods, as if she understood more than she should at her age. And I smile, because I know that, even though the past isn't erased, love can bloom in the middle of the ruins. One day, I received a letter from the penitentiary. It was from David. I hesitated to open it. For hours, I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of everything it meant. When I finally dared, his clumsy handwriting pierced my soul. "Mom, I don't know how to start. Everything I say will sound hollow after the damage I did to you, but I want you to know that I am paying for what we did every second." Vanessa couldn't handle the guilt. She had a mental breakdown. I forgave her, but I can't forgive myself. I saw you that night, so firm, so calm, and I understood that you can't fool someone who already learned to survive. If one day you decide to see me, it won't be to justify myself, but to thank you. Because it was you who taught me that love also knows how to say enough. With love and shame, David. I cried. Not from rage, nor from sadness, but from a broken tenderness. Because behind those words was something that never stopped existing. My son. The same one who once gave me flowers made of paper and promised to take care of me. I went to see him a week later. The sound of the lock, the metallic smell of the hallway, and the echo of footsteps made me feel in another life. When he appeared on the other side of the glass, I didn't see a criminal. I saw a tired man with sunken eyes, but alive. I picked up the phone in the cubicle and spoke first. "Hello, son." He lowered his gaze. "Mom, I don't know if I deserve you being here." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But here I am anyway." We looked at each other in silence. Time didn't pass. Only that instant suspended between the past and the possibility of forgiveness existed. "You know what hurt me most, David?" I asked. "Not that you wanted my money or my things. It hurt me that you believed you had no other way out but to hurt me." He started to cry, unable to answer. And in that weeping, I understood that his regret was real, even if it arrived late. "I forgive you," I told him finally. "Not for you, but for me. Because I don't want to keep being the woman who carries the hate of others." When I left the prison, the air seemed different, lighter. The sky was cloudy, but inside me something shone. Forgiveness hadn't erased the pain, but it had taken away its power to keep ruling my life. That night, I returned home and lit a candle in front of Arthur's photo. "I did it," I whispered to him. "I didn't win, nor did I lose. I just survived. And that is already enough." Lily was sleeping in her room. I approached the window and saw the reflection of both of us in the glass, a girl and a woman who had crossed the fire together. And I knew that Arthur, wherever he was smiling in silence. Today the house smells of fresh bread, the same bread I used to make for David when he was a boy. And although the absences weigh heavy, love also reinvents itself. I have learned that true power isn't in revenge, but in the calm that arrives after telling the truth. As I write this, I look at the family photo I still keep. I didn't take it off the wall. I don't want to erase history. I want to remember it, so I don't repeat it. And if there is something I wish whoever listens to my story understands, it is this: that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting the unforgivable, but freeing the heart to breathe again. This brings us to the end of my story. It's fiction, sure, but born from the very real struggles many of us face. The silent battles within families, and the courage it takes to stand up for your own dignity. If you've ever felt like the ground was crumbling beneath you, remember that truth is the only foundation that holds. I'm Susan Bennett, and I hope this story reminds you that even when the night is darkest, dawn is always coming. Take care of yourselves and each other.